Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the APAC Digital Defense Hack. I'm developer Ali. First, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet and work today, to pay respect to elders past and present, and acknowledge the important role all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play in our developer community. So welcome to the Digital Defense Hack. I understand we're getting started very soon. About that, and I'm super excited to be here with you. So just a little bit about the venue, because I know it is a little bit different to maybe what you've seen before. So this is remote. When we're not in present mode, as we are now, you can chat by turning on your microphone or camera. If you're a bit camera shy, feel free to just turn on your microphone and talk to other people at your table. You can jump to other tables by just double clicking on a table to the right. You can also, a really cool tip, you can change your view. So if one of the presenters today is presenting slides like I am now, you'll be able to hit the top right of that and full screen it if you want to have a look more closely at it. There's also a Q&A tab in the chat. So if you have any questions for our presenters, please feel free to use the Q&A tab, and they'll be keeping an eye on that, so they'll be able to get straight back to you with answers. So our speakers today are, I am super excited to announce our awesome speakers, because between them, they probably have about 40 years of experience in the cyber and security and development world. So first up, the amazing Chris Hawkins. He's our cybersecurity CTO for IBM Australia and New Zealand. So really got cyber royalty here with us today. So Chris has over 2 decades of experience in security and technology. He regularly publishes content and engages in all mediums of media and social media, and loves having strategic conversations about the future of cybersecurity. I also think I saw he put a patent in the other day for something. So definitely a great guy to ask all manner of questions in, so get engaged. We've also got the amazing Narayana. Narayana is a software engineer and master inventor at IBM. He's an experienced developer and with a demonstrated history in delivering software products. And I know he is also a massive advocate of the developer community, and he's a mentor with a long list of accomplishments too. So super excited to have him here with us as well. So on to the workshop now. Thank you so much, Chris and Ariana, for being here. I'll invite you to the stage. I hope. It's 1 second, guys. So stand by, technical issues. Chris, you should be able to chat now. Turn your mic and camera on.
Yeah, here I am.
Awesome. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Ali. Are you inviting? You'll invite Narayana. Here he is. Here he comes. Narayana, you can hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I'm sharing the screen. You can go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thanks very much, Narayana and team and everyone who's here joining us today. You know, we're in a very exciting time in cybersecurity. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. There's a growing need for, you know, more capability, you know, more skill, more innovation than we've ever had before. So I'm looking forward to some of the results, judging on Sunday as well. Today's agenda, I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of set the scene around, you know, cybersecurity as a kind of a phenomena that we're going through, and, you know, I guess some of the drivers and what, you know, IBM is doing, you know, of course, relevant to the people here, and introduce some of the capabilities that we'll be making available to the team for the weekend. And then, you know, I think Narayana is going to dig a little deeper on some open standards work that we, you know, have been driving as well. You know, and I guess the role of standards in this I'll cover as well. So yeah, with that, I'll take control of the screen, Narayana, and we can get into the content.
Yeah.
Just see if I can do that. don't know what's screen option is not showing up.
Just do a share screen.
Yeah, trying to. It doesn't. It's not allowing me to do that. Click the button and it just kind of disappears. Ali, is there a way? I was doing this before, but it's not happening. White button on the bottom.
I'm just gonna, sorry. Sorry everyone that's here, welcome as well. So Chris, maybe just do a quick refresh of your page.
Yeah.
Might leaves you for a second, but just do a quick refresh of the browser. You know, the turn it on and off again, the ultimate IT trick, isn't it?
I am back, and this is looking better. So thank you.
Awesome.
Let me do it now. That wonderful thing about doing these events is that every time you do one, there's a subtle different way of doing things. So it looks like we're back on. So let me. You guys can see my screen now. You can see my screen, Narayana?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, so thanks very much again for kind of coming today, and also your time on the weekend. Just wanted to kind of talk about security in general, and I guess the first thing I'd say is that, you know, we're living in a world where this is a global problem, right? And the attackers are kind of enabled with modern technology, interconnectivity, the ability to collaborate, you know, at scale, uninhibited by, you know, any policies or processes or anything that, you know, generally would get in the way of innovation and progress within enterprise or our own lives, right? So, you know, I think what's unique in how we go about addressing this problem is that whether you're, you know, IBM in Australia, and, you know, this is us, I'll talk about that a little bit more, or whether you're a bank, or whether you're a, you know, a government entity or a citizen, cybersecurity has a direct impact on you. But, you know, the impact it has on you is really a context, in the context by which you are operating, right? If you're a bank, you're worried about your customers, you're worried about the financial stability of what you're delivering, the threats that are coming from the outside. You know, as a government entity, you're worried about the stability of the nation, and, you know, the people, how you're protecting them, providing services that will, you know, be clear of any kind of threats, and underpinning things like the financial system, right? Critical infrastructure. So the measurement of what cybersecurity means to each of these organizations is a little bit different. And even for you and I, in our own homes, now we're working from home, we're worried about things that are different to what they were before when we were in the office, right? So that's why, you know, when you look at how you address this problem, you can't really just say, well, I'm in Australia or I'm in India and we're going to build this product and it's going to fix cybersecurity in our country, right? Because, you know, you have to take in that insight in order to make things real, you know, in terms of measuring the way that your solution is operating and how effective it is, you know, because attackers are not just going to be coming from within your own nation, right? So for us, you know, we've got an Asia Pacific business, of course. Each nation is, within that has its own kind of people, each region delivering software and services. And most of them actually have an R&D facility as well. And in Australia, we have, you know, Narayana and I kind of sit in an area where we're close to the people who are building products. In fact, Narayana actually does build global security products that the team actually sells. So, you know, we have the same thing in Singapore, in India, of course, in multiple locations, in Taiwan. So, you know, that's a really important, you know, recognition that innovation can happen anywhere. And those folks deliver, capabilities so that we can sell and service them. And anything to do with software and services, software delivery has both the products, but also then the people who deliver capability, either by architecting, integrating, or supporting, and also even doing things like incident response or threat hunting or any one of these things. And managed security is also part of that. So if you're considering a career in cybersecurity and you're here today to experience some of that, there's plenty of opportunities and jobs and roles to get involved. And really diversity of opinion is really something that we need more of in cybersecurity. So, global problem felt locally, sovereign capabilities often the need where the government wants their own citizens involved in the way that services get delivered. So there's opportunity, I guess, for everybody. If I look at how we go about organizing ourselves and the challenges, so this might feed into some of your ideas. We're like I said before, we're living in a world where advanced threats are able to be made against our infrastructure by well-organized and intelligent and funded individuals. That manifests itself from any nation to infrastructure that may be servicing any number of use cases, right? So the attacks are getting more sophisticated, more advanced, and the cloud is actually both enabled that, but also brought a whole new dimension of risk that organizations have in terms of their IT infrastructure now being run as software in some other data center, right? So no longer is there a clear line of separation between what we operate ourselves in our enterprises with a moat, with kind of a border and a moat where you can put security around it. It's now leaking out to all manner of IT compute running anywhere else. And when you think about how you counter some of these problems, compliance, if you're not doing enough as an enterprise, what normally means is the government gets involved and drives compliance demands down through enterprise. So you really, to operate as a business, you have to comply with certain legal obligations. And we're seeing in most nations, the government organising themselves in terms of driving cybersecurity programs down through enterprise. And there's things like Privacy Act, there's digital identity, there's open banking, there's all sorts of examples of this. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, GDPR affects you, right? So it's a global phenomena, even in the compliance area. And we don't have enough people defending against these attacks and delivering to these requirements. And more workloads are not just moving to cloud, but they're also being invoked in the edge on mobile devices, and we're carrying data around like we were just storing on hard disks, 20 years ago. So there's an enormous amount of IT required to counter this. And I've made a couple of statements here to support the blue boxes, because you're probably going to work on a project in these blue boxes, and if you're building some software as part of this. And kind of the left-hand side is about what I consider identity and data and risk. So it's enabling the right user under the right conditions to access the right information and have the right access rights. So right user under the conditions of what data, and that's what we call protect. And I'll talk a little bit about how to enable that in the hackathon soon. The other side of it is about managing. So this is about that. The first part is about how do I enable security in my DevOps process. The second one is more about how do I detect and prevent those attacks from causing damage, and what should I do if they do attack the infrastructure, like the process, the procedures, the automation, what threats are relevant, where are they, how do I hunt them down? So that's what the right context for the known threats, responding to breaches and hunting the perpetrators. So it's more of a kind of a policing domain. And in IBM, one thing we're very lucky to have is we've got global capability with expertise, solving big problems, right, with incorporation of things like AI. big partnerships with ecosystem partners, and really an open approach to addressing some of these problems. And I guess I talked a little bit before about the modern problem. And, you know, if you think about where we're at today, where we were a year ago, IT compute was, you know, transformation was happening. People were moving information out into cloud environments. But what really exploded was we also had to move. We moved back home. We are in our home office. You know, we're now all sorts of applications had to be enabled in cloud infrastructure. Data now is being stored out there somewhere else than what it might have been before. Enterprise had to drive a whole lot of change in a very short period of time, right? So that meant that, you know, security became somewhat disconnected. I guess the challenge for enterprise is to make sure that they keep their arms wrapped around all of this, whether it's where the users are coming from and what data they're accessing, where the threats are in this ecosystem and how do I detect them, not just the threats that are not relevant to me, but the ones that are, and what should I do about it if I do get breached? So all of those questions still are relevant, but we need a completely you know, flexible architecture and approach for delivering that type of solution, right? And, you know, I think there's some real issues that we're facing as part of the larger ecosystem around the amount of noise, the number of tools that need to be integrated, the complexity of the alerts and how to deal with them. So, you know, I think when you're thinking about some of these hackathon activities, keep in mind that we do need new solutions to some of new approaches to some of the problems that we're facing today. And, you know, if you're a new engineer, you understand the new platforms as much as, you know, anyone in the industry. So love to see some of your new thoughts. And if I look at things like open standards and open systems, which I'll talk about a little bit. You know, you should be aware of Red Hat. Red Hat delivered a whole lot of open operating systems on Linux. Applications and data are really running on open source and open infrastructure and open standards. There's a whole community of developers who are contributing to things like Kubernetes, Red Hat being OpenShift for that. And security really has an opportunity to leverage some of that scale that the open community is delivering in order to solve some of those mega problems. So I would also think about, you know, maybe do some investigation around what it is around open source and open standards that would be relevant for you to consume as one of these projects as well. We're going to give you some tools to help. So just to kind of summarize what open kind of means to us, open standards, you know, if you look at things like identity, you've got things like single sign-on, you've got things, and inside of there's SAML, there's OpenID Connect, there's a whole lot of standards that you can incorporate into a web application or some other application that allows you to standardize on security controls around identity. Even strong authentication, things like FIDO2 is a security standard that is being broadly adopted. The beautiful thing about standards is that when they're incorporated into an ecosystem, it means that products interoperate without you having to write a whole lot of code to make them talk to each other. So SAML with single sign-on, two parties don't really need to collaborate in terms of source code in order for it to work. Things like data security, encryption, all of those, the way we use the internet, HTTP, all of that is based on open standards. Open source, there's a lot of examples of open source emerging today, particularly around the container security area. We won't talk about too much of that today because you probably won't have the time really to do too much exploration around that. But certainly IBM is contributing to both open source and also consuming open source inside of some of our platforms that will enable the next generation of security capability, right? Because, you know, it's not just about one company taking all of their expertise and building the entire ecosystem. It's about making sure that you're open and able to incorporate the innovation that may come from a different area. And that's a bit of the community approach, a collaboration approach, and yeah, have a look at some of those assets as well, which we'll share in Slack. And the last one is best practices. Whether you're following something like a NIST standard, which is very popular in enterprise to measure cybersecurity maturity, a national one like Australia's ASD Top 8. I'm sure the Cybersecurity Alliance, the department in Singapore would have them, and I'm sure in India and elsewhere around Asia Pacific, you have similar standards. There's even things like OWASP, which is web security best practices and standard for measuring the ability of a web application to be secure. Right, so I'm going to take a breath now, take a bit of a rest, and talk a little bit about where IBM is delivering today for this hackathon that you can get access to. First of all, on the left-hand side,
just before you do, we've got
IBM Verify.
Just before you do, we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A tab that maybe you wouldn't mind answering for people. The first one is A3C working with international counterpart?
A3C, hang on.
Yep.
Just checking. What is A3C?
Cyber Collaboration. Australian Cyber Collaboration Center.
The South Australian group, yeah. So the question was, is A3C working with, I'm just trying to look for the question.
Yep, it's in the Q&A tab
International
there.
standards.
Well, yeah, you'd have to ask A3C on that. I haven't specifically spoken to them about international engagement. I understand that they've got an affiliation with one of the major universities in the United States. I don't know whether it was Stanford or someone like that. And I know someone in AusCyber is on this session, in and around this session as well. So they might be able to pick up that question. But yeah, I mean, I think obviously anyone in the cybersecurity domain will be working with counterparts elsewhere, because it's not, like I said, it's not a local problem. You need a local ecosystem, but you can't just expect it to be solved by one set of individuals in a particular nation. How do you prevent the open source innovations from falling into the wrong hands? Well, I mean, that's about certification. So there's a whole lot of ways. Obviously, there's some open source is contributed by IBM. Others are kind of adopted as well. And there's a certification process around that, and obviously source code control, all of those things. But my point around open source is that there are good ideas and people are building content. So even things like Falco and inside of SysDig, it's part of SysDig Secure is something adopted. But that's where the certified containers kind of help. An open knowledge management system apart from Wiki. I don't know the answer to that question. So let me share and just describe. I think I got all the questions. Let me see if can you see my screen? Here we go. It's got the pop up. Okay, so where am I here? Okay, so what are we providing today as part of the hackathon? So you can, first of all, I wanted to make sure that you knew that you can use an IBM Verify Cloud Identity tenant. And so we've got instructions on that inside of the help with IBM hashtag or the group in Slack. It'll allow you to subscribe to a tenant for a number of days, and it'll give you access to things like the ability to build to do single sign-on, to build a strong authentication capability for an application, either through JavaScript or with the SDK. So that's the first part. The second part, I think Narayana is going to give us more information about this, but IBM also shares it's threat intelligence through a system called the X-Force Exchange. You can sign up to that. Both of these just require an IBM ID. So sign up to that. You can enable you can either grab content that's already there because it's an open platform on the internet, or you can sign up for some of the capabilities to incorporate some of the threat intelligence into one of your experiments or one of your hacks. So I think with that, Narayana, I might just hand over to you, and I'll take a break. And if we've got more time, I can come back later.
Yeah, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen and sticks on it? Okay, so like Chris has mentioned about open standards, and one way to achieve it is using sticks. Sticks stands for Structured Threat Information Expression. So in this slide deck, I'll just quickly go through why we need sticks and the kind of data types that are available and domain objects, relationships. And you query a sticks bundle and visualize sticks, as well as about Sticks Shifter, which is an open source project for it's like an information architecture open source project for converting your native vendor specific logs into sticks standards. So let's think of the problem now. Say, for example, you are in company A, and company A has detected a malicious activity on their network. So they found a hash which is supposed to be to indicate a malware called CryptoLocker, and it's using a particular SIM tool. And then what happened is company B now has this malware in its network. So how does company A share that threat intelligence with company B so that B can use that insights and probably share additional citing information back to other companies? So the main challenge with security is we have got a hybrid multi-cloud architectures, and we have a number of data lakes, but they're all in silos and disparate sources. And the workflows are fragmented and disconnected. So normally any particular tool is good at doing one thing, but it doesn't do the other thing. So we need an common open architecture that can cater to all these different kinds of vendor tools and still work. So you would like to do a federated search on different logs from different vendors, and also connect to their data sources and do some threat hunting. So the solution is to talk the same language. So different vendors should be able to talk in the same language. So we need an information or data model that's open and industry accepted. So whatever threat intelligence is available, you should be able to share it in a common standardized language. And there have been some efforts done by OASIS and Open Cybersecurity Alliance to come up with an open standard for cyber security threat intelligence data to be shared across companies. So it's essentially a language with some data types. It has got a serialization format, and any particular bundle can be, a threat intelligence bundle can be shown as a graph, which is a connected graph of nodes and edges, where the nodes could be things like attack patterns, campaigns, indicators, or malware, or an attacking individual, or it could be a threat actor or a tool or a vulnerability, and the relationships are the relationship between two different nodes. It could be a relationship of this indicates this, or it could be a citing relationship that I have seen a malware and I would like to share that intelligence with other companies. So in the previous scenario that I mentioned, company A has detected some malicious activity on its network, and now it can publish this threat intelligence in the form of an sticks bundle using taxi server. So now this particular domain object, which is an indicator, indicates a malware. And then company B can use this threat intelligence and search for these indicators in its own logs. It will find something, and then it can report that it has cited this malware. And that is sent back to the taxi server so that others can identify that there are quite a few sightings, and this is very common malware as of today. So this sighting record will be added by company B, and this data will be sent back to the taxi server for distribution. So let's look at the data types, the language itself. So like any language, you need some data types. These are the basic ones like Boolean, timestamp, string, integer, float, and you could have a list. And then you could have external references where you don't have enough data here, so you could point to an external URL where you could find additional documentation. And then you also have a data type called hashes. It's a key value pair. So you'll have the actual value and the type of the hash. And then each object in the sticks language will have an you need to uniquely identify each object. So for example, if it's an indicator, it will have an ID. And for a threat actor, there will be an ID. And then in terms of threat hunting, so every particular attack will have certain phases. So you could use the skill chain phases to indicate which phase of attack is this. And then there is a lot of open vocabulary that's available, like malicious activity, fraud activity, and things like that. And now the important point here is cyber observables. Observables are mainly used for malware characterization, detecting intrusion, responding to incidents, and it acts as a digital forensics for identifying threats in your within your organization's perimeter logs. And it mainly documents facts about what happened on the network and instead of who, when, why, it'll just give you some fact of this has happened on the network. And it has got type and extensions. So a popular observable is an artifact. Artifact could be anything like a payload. It could be an image or JPEG. Payload type is that, and the value is this. So in your threat hunt, you'll be finding a number of artifacts and adding them to your case for further investigation. And autonomous systems, it's just the name of a system. And you have directory objects like a file system directory, domain names, email addresses.
So Narayana, I'm just going to ask a question here.
Yeah.
So what you're describing is a data format for products that are installed in an environment. They might be security products, and you might write your own little product in this hackathon, and you want to tell another product that you observe something. You can do that using this format that you're describing, right? So that and you can do that without the other product just needs to know how to communicate, and that's what the open source and open standards piece is all about, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So yeah, the experiment might be take a threat intel feed, hunt, look inside of a stick, communicate via sticks or whatever, sticks bundle. Yeah, just run us through what a scenario might be.
Right. So those are the observables, like there could be a MAC address, thing that indicates a malicious thing. It could be a network traffic process object or software URL. All these are like cyber observables, and then you have domain objects, which are which have a number of properties, like whether it's an identity or it could be an observed data or an indicator, malware. So each domain object can be represented in the form of an domain object, like the type of the object and then ID and a lot of other details. And then there is a relationship between domain objects. Like I'll show you some relationships here. So a particular hash might indicate a particular campaign. So you have an indicator, you have a campaign, and a relationship. So
if you took a threat feed, you might be able to take some of the elements of a threat report that's out of the X-Force Exchange, and you could even produce yourself, a taxonomy that says this campaign that's described this way has a number of elements, a URL, a hash, and they're connected in these ways. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's exactly. And then you could query this bundle as well. So I'll just show you I'll just show you a visualizer of a sticks bundle or a thread feed, that how it looks like. So let me share you an sticks viewer. So if you look at this is how you can visualize your thread feed. So it's essentially a sticks bundle that I have taken, and it has got all these actors. So there are certain attack patterns you can observe. There is a HTTP flood. They were trying to, this story is about an election campaign, and some other country was trying to flood the campaign of one particular party, which is this People's Party. And then they used certain threat intrusion set. So these attack patterns were used. Content spoofing is one, and HTTP flooding is one. So if you click on any of this, it will change the view a little bit, and you could look at data here, the kind of attack and stuff. So probably in the interest of time, I would just show you how.
Narayana.
Sorry?
There's a couple of questions. If you want to take a look at the second, I'll answer the first one if you want to take a look at the second one. So yeah, the IBM X-Force Exchange is a free web interface is free up to a certain number of records per month. You can then license it after that, but you can register as an IBM ID. And yes, there's different classifications of the type of data. We have some of it is feeds. So we have an advanced threat protection feed, which is a list of actionable indicators. There's also just a standard commercial and enterprise API where, yeah, you can either get that data via a sticks format, or you can use a REST API to get it. There's developer documentation all online to have a look at that. So thanks to you, Saza, for your question.
So for the next question, so the relationship aspect, yeah, that's correct. It's a GraphDB is more appropriate because you have domain objects and relationships between the domain objects, like you have malware indicates something, and then an attack vector is an attack pattern is using a specific malware to target a specific organization. So GraphDB is ideal. It's a
next graph. So the next question, Sticks and so yeah, Sticks and Taxi was first created by Oasis as a standard for the sharing of threat intelligence, automation for sharing of threat intelligence, but two organizations as subscribers and reverse backward and forward, right? So that's above and outside of the enterprise. What we're talking about here, Narayana is talking about, is an open standards effort that is different to that. It's called Sticks Shifter. It's part of the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, so go and have a look at that. And what it does is it reuses some of those concepts for products to interoperate with each other. It's not about sharing threat intelligence. It's about making an ecosystem of products that today you integrate using APIs that are proprietary for the products. So in the future, when adoption of this kind of standard exists, those products will work together using a different data taxonomy and transport than what Sticks and Taxi is. I hope that answers that question. And you know, we're just giving you a bit of an education on this because you may want to go and look at some of this open standards because in that open standards piece, it's actually also an open source library. So you can go and grab your GitHub data, repositories, examples. You may have scenarios where you can incorporate, you know, we're not telling you what to do, but you could take threat intelligence data as an input. You could go and search some products that are installed inside of a product, and you could, inside of your environment, you could simulate that. And this is just the threat management example, right? And there's some resources that you can use for that. So if I wanted to go back just a little bit on the identity side as well, because you want to finish, Narayana?
I want to finish my X-Force Exchange. I have a few screens to show, and then I can give it to you. Okay.
Beauty of live broadcast.
So this is an X-Force Exchange platform as such. You could search for a particular vulnerability or an IP address or a lot of things, and it has got a beautiful dashboard with a lot of feed on the latest threat intelligence that's available right from IBM Iris researchers and X-Force researchers, as well as third party. Everyone can add a feed, a collection to this. So if you look at this, there are a number of activities that are happening. So people are adding new collections and commenting on certain collections. And if you look at, there are around 4,891 public collections that are available about different kinds of threats, and these are the categories. You could look at any of these threats in detail. Like this one was a banking Trojan stealing financial information, and it has a lot of information really. And if you would like to use this information in your hackathon project, you could look at the API. So the way to look at the API is you just have API here, click on it, and this is the guide. So you need to create an IBM ID, and then you have to use the API keys, and you could, it's just a RESTful API, and you could just call and request for data, which will be sent in the form of JSON. So you could ask for different bots, IPs, malware, specific malwares, and as well as you could, in the advanced threat protection feed, you could even get some of the collections by ID, and you could get them as sticks markup as well. And there are some blogs in security intelligence that you can have a look at, as well as there is a GitHub example of how to use X-Force Exchange using Python. And there is a Node.js library as well to interact with IBM X-Force Exchange. So with that, I would like to give it back to you.
Okay. If there are any more questions, no more questions. We did okay, hopefully, on those last ones. So I'm just gonna go through. So yeah, so I guess we started off with describing, you know, that, I mean, IBM has a lot of capability in this area, right? As a global company, you know, that there's an opportunity for you to look at some of the open standards in this hackathon and make use of some open source that's available as well. We talked about sticks, the threat intelligence side. So if you're oriented towards doing a hackathon around threat management, detection, response, investigation, then that's kind of the sticks piece is part of that. X-Force Exchange. If I go back to the identity piece for a second, so for those that want to stay on the digital trust, or the zero trust side, we've got, you know, some resources. You can go to our website and request a free tenant for IBM Verify, and IBM Verify gives you access to a number of different capabilities. So, you know, it's strong authentication and single sign-on. The strong authentication is probably the one that may be easier. I mean, you can build an app and then you can configure it to do single sign-on, but for multi-factor authentication and strong authentication, you could put together a demo where you use the tenant itself to register a user, and then for them to take a mobile device, which you can download an app off the App Store called IBM Security Verify. That user can then register that device with your site, and then it's kind of enabled to interact with your code once you build a website. So what you can do is you can build a website that then has an API that you can embed some JavaScript into to make calls to send some authentication requests to that mobile app for the user. So you can actually build yourself kind of an end-to-end scenario using information or data that's available. There's an SDK. If you go and look at the Help IBM group, then there's a bunch of SDKs here. There's a JavaScript SDK that you can drop into a web application to invoke some of those methods that I talked about before. And yeah, there's a landing page here as well. So once you create your tenant, you can actually go in and there's a bunch of documentation URLs, helper URLs, and docs that you can use to build an application. So yeah, authentication, single sign-on, that's probably the two. Probably authentication if you're interested in building a multi-factor authentication scheme. You can do push notification, you can do presence testing, that type of thing. With again, you don't have to build the app. You can use the IBM Verify app out of the box that registers with your tenant, and you can drive a whole scenario around that. So I wanted to kind of cover that off before we ran out of time. There's no more questions here. Any more thoughts, Narayana, on resources or help? Narayana's no longer on my screen. Here he comes. He's coming back.
So, yeah, I think X46, I mean, depends on your use case really. So what do you want to do? Are you gonna create an use case that can do some kind of threat hunting? You could use some logs and convert them into sticks bundles and probably get the feed from the X-Force Exchange and through the API setup provided. And then that could tell whether there was an active attack or a malware in your logs. And you could show that in your dashboard, or you could think of such use cases for the hackathon, I think.
Yeah, and I think if I look at the two examples we gave, on the identity side, enterprise clients are using exactly that today to enable their applications for online access. So it might be those open standards that underpin single sign-on, like OpenID Connect or SAML. It might be multi-factor authentication using a standard like FIDO2. Same thing, tenant, obviously integration. They'll have a whole bunch of people building applications, but all running in a cloud tenant. On the threat hunting side, a much more sophisticated area in terms of the complexity of tools in integration. But I think the focus on taking information that IBM produces globally, which is your threat intel feed, and saying, okay, well, I'm getting a bunch of real-time information that I can use to go and hunt for that data inside of my repositories. Now, you've got to create the repository, right? So connecting the insight with the data is really something that you can kind of do. So maybe imagine some of those. What's going on? I'm in some weird mode, am I?
No, that's good.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah.
I was sharing my screen. Was it doing the
Matrix?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Matrix. Anyway, so I encourage you. There's a lot more you can do as well. I mean, you might want to do some other stuff with OpenSSL and encryption, and there's a whole lot you can do outside of what we've given you here today. But yeah, we've got some accelerators here that can help you get started. So I think with that, if there's no more questions. What do you reckon, Narayana? We wrap up?
We just wish them all the best and wrap up, I guess.
See you on the weekend.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Narayana, and talk. I'm sure other participants had got a lot out of that. So thank you all for joining us. Like Chris and Narayana said, there's a Slack channel, Help with IBM. Feel free to ask all your questions there. There's heaps of resources in there as well. And happy hacking. And this will be recorded as well, so you can go back and check out some key pieces if you missed anything. Thank you so much again, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.